The ship was old. It made noises that no ship should make. Every time Dohan crawled under the plasma relay, he heard a deep groan from somewhere inside the walls, like the vessel itself was tired of flying. He wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the mess of wires above him. The Baekdu was not a warship. It was not fast. It was not beautiful. But it was his, and it still flew, and that was enough. He was halfway through reconnecting a burned coupling when the airlock chimed. Someone was requesting entry. Dohan pulled himself out from under the console and walked to the door, expecting a supply delivery or maybe a lost dock worker. Instead, he found a hegemony courier standing in the corridor, tall, gray-skinned, with 4 arms folded neatly behind its back. It held a silver cylinder in one hand. Delivery for the human vessel registered as Baekdu, the courier said in flat translated speech. Official summons from the Hegemony Central Authority. Dowan took the cylinder. It was cold and heavier than it looked. Before he could ask a question, the courier turned and walked away without another word. That was normal for Hegemony officials. They did not believe in small talk with humans. He opened the cylinder at his workbench. Inside was a single document, printed on material that felt like metal and silk at the same time. The Hegemony logo sat at the top, a circle of stars surrounding a clenched fist. Below it, in several galactic languages and one rough translation into Korean, was a formal notice. Earth had been selected to send a representative to the Crucible trials. Dowan read it twice. Then he sat down and read it a third time. His stomach felt cold. He knew about the Crucible trials. Everyone did. It was the Hegemony's way of measuring species. A brutal public tournament where each civilization sent its best warrior to fight through a series of combat and survival challenges. The results determined a species threat classification, which affected everything from trade deals to territorial rights. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for 12 years now, and in all that time, they had been classified as Class C. Harmless, unremarkable, the kind of species that bigger civilizations stepped over without looking down. Dohan opened a comm channel to the Hegemony homeworld. It took several minutes to connect, but eventually, the face of Sujin appeared on his screen. She was older than him by about 10 years, with sharp eyes and the calm expression of someone who spent every day negotiating with aliens who thought humans were insects. "I got the summons," Dohan said. "I know," Sujin replied. "The entire embassy has been in meetings since this morning. Is this real? They want us to send someone to the Crucible?" Sujin leaned back in her chair. "It is real, and it is not random. 3 species on the Hegemony Council have been trying to block our application for Class B trade status. This is their move. They want us to send someone, fail publicly, and give them a reason to keep us locked at Class C for another decade." Dohan rubbed his face. "So what do we do? Can we refuse?" "Refusal counts as a forfeit. Same result. We lose standing either way." Sujin paused. "Earth's military council has already chosen a representative." "Who?" There was a silence that lasted a beat too long. Then Sujin said, "My sister, Yuna." Dohan blinked. He had met Yuna once about 2 years ago, when Sujin had invited him to a dinner at the embassy. Yuna had been quiet the entire evening. She was small, maybe 60 centimeters, with a round face and a habit of looking at people like she was reading something written on the inside of their skulls. She had eaten her food, said very little, and left early. Dohan remembered thinking she seemed like a schoolteacher, not a soldier. "Yuna," he repeated. "Your sister Yuna." "Yes." "The quiet one." "Yes." Dohan leaned forward. "Sujin, the Crucible champions are monsters. I have seen footage. The current record holder is a creature with bones on the outside of its body, and claws that can cut through starship armor. And you want to send—" "I did not choose her," Sujin interrupted, her voice firm. "The council chose her. and the council knows things about my sister that you do not. She ended the call before he could argue further. That night, Do-hwan could not sleep. He sat in the cockpit of the Baekdu and pulled up everything he could find on the Crucible trials. The footage was terrifying. Champions from dozens of species tearing through obstacle courses, fighting drones, breaking through walls with their bare hands. The average completion time for the primary challenge was over 6 minutes. The record was 4 minutes and 11 seconds, set by a champion from a species whose entire civilization was built around war. He also searched for information on Yuna. There was almost nothing. A few records showed she had served in the Korean military, but her file was mostly redacted. No rank listed, no unit listed, just a name and a photograph of a young woman with calm, dark eyes. 3 days later, Yuna arrived on the Baekdu. She walked up the boarding ramp, carrying a single duffel bag over one shoulder. She wore plain dark clothes and simple shoes. She looked like someone arriving for a weekend trip, not someone about to represent her entire species in a galactic death tournament. Do-hwan met her at the airlock. He tried to smile. "Welcome aboard. I am Do-hwan. I will be your pilot and, I guess, your support crew." "Thank you," Yuna said. Her voice was soft and even. She looked around the ship with quick, careful eyes that seemed to measure every wall, every doorway, every shadow. Then she looked back at him and gave a small nod, as if she had already decided the ship was acceptable. Do-hwan helped her carry her bag to the small crew quarters. As she unpacked, which took less than 2 minutes because she had brought almost nothing, he stood in the doorway and tried to think of something encouraging to say. "So," he began, "are you nervous?" Yuna folded a shirt and placed it neatly in a drawer. She considered the question the way someone might consider a math problem that was too easy to be interesting. "About what?" she said. Do-hwan opened his mouth, then closed it. He did not have an answer that felt right. He just nodded and left her alone. Later, sitting in the cockpit, as the Baekdu pulled away from the station and pointed itself toward the Crucible, Do-hwan thought about something Sujin had said. "The council knows things about my sister that you do not." He looked at the stars ahead of him and wondered what kind of person could walk toward the most dangerous arena in the galaxy and feel nothing at all. He was not sure. He wanted to find out. The Crucible station was built around a dead moon. From a distance, it looked like a metal ring someone had dropped around a gray stone. Enormous, cold, and covered in lights that blinked like 1,000 eyes, watching every ship that approached. Do-hwan had seen pictures of it before, but pictures did not capture the size. It was bigger than any city he had ever known, bigger than some countries. The Baekdu docked at a lower port, far from the main entrance. The good docking bays were reserved for species that mattered. Humans did not matter. Not yet. Yuna walked beside Do-hwan through the long corridors of the station. She carried nothing. She wore the same plain dark clothes she had arrived in. Around them, the station buzzed with alien life. Species of every shape and size, moving through wide hallways made of a smooth, dark material that reflected light like water. Some of the aliens were enormous, standing 3 meters tall or more, covered in scales or armor plating or thick fur. Others were thin and fast, with too many limbs and eyes that moved independently. Every single one of them looked at Yuna. Some looked with curiosity. Most looked with something closer to amusement. A few laughed. One champion, a massive reptilian creature with a jaw wide enough to fit a human head inside, stopped directly in their path and looked down at Yuna for a long moment. Its yellow eyes moved over her slowly, like it was inspecting something it had found stuck to its foot. "This is the human," it said, its translator producing a deep rumbling voice. "You are a species of soft worms. I could break you with one hand." Yuna looked up at the creature. She did not step back. She did not tense. She studied its face the way someone might study a road sign, noting the information and moving on. Then she walked around it without saying a word. The reptilian champion stared after her, and for just a moment, something in its expression shifted. Not fear, not yet, but confusion. It was not used to being ignored. Dowan hurried to keep up with her. "Are you okay?" he whispered. "Yes," Yuna said simply. They reached the main briefing hall, a vast circular room with seats rising in rows around a central platform. Champions from 43 species sat in their designated areas. The human section was small, tucked into a corner with only 2 seats. Dowan and Yuna sat down. On the central platform stood Taejin. He was tall even by hegemony standards, with dark blue skin and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He was the senior official of the Crucible trials and had overseen them for decades. His voice filled the hall without any visible effort. "You are here because your species believe you are the best they have to offer. The Crucible does not care about belief. It cares about proof." He explained the first round, the strategic elimination chamber. Each champion would enter a massive arena alone, a shifting, changing space filled with obstacles, traps, automated turrets, and attack drones. The goal was simple: get from the outer edge to the center console and place your hand on it. Along the way, the arena would try to stop you. The arena's difficulty was calibrated based on the current threat classification of each species. For Class A species, the apex predators of the galaxy, the arena ran at full power. For lower classes, it adjusted. "The benchmark time," Taejin continued, "set by the reigning champion, is 4 minutes and 11 seconds. This is the standard against which all of you will be measured." Dowan swallowed hard. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Set by a species that had been fighting wars since before humans had learned to make fire. After the briefing, as the champions filed out, Taejin stepped down from the platform and walked directly toward the human section. He moved with the slow, careful steps of someone who believed he was being kind. He stopped in front of Yuna and looked at her for a long time. His expression was not cruel. It was sad. "Human," he said quietly, "I want to speak with you." Yuna stood. She barely reached his chest. Taejin glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I have overseen the Crucible for 37 cycles. I have watched champions from every corner of this galaxy enter the chamber. Some of them were powerful. Some were brilliant. Many of them were broken." He paused. "The arena has been calibrated for your species at the lowest difficulty setting. Even so, it will be harsh. You are a Class C species. Your bodies are soft. Your senses are limited. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom." Yuna listened without expression. "I am offering you something I do not offer often," Taejin continued. "Withdraw now. If you leave before the trial begins, your species will lose a small amount of standing. It will be embarrassing, but it will not be devastating. If you enter that arena and fail, or worse, if you are injured, the damage to your species' reputation will be far greater." He looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I will give you 4 minutes. Survive that long, and your species keeps its dignity. That is the best outcome I can offer you." Yuna looked up at him. Her dark eyes were steady. There was no anger in them, no pride, no fear. She looked at him the way she had looked at the reptilian champion in the corridor, reading, measuring, and then moving on. She nodded once, just once. Then she turned and walked toward the starting gate. Taejin watched her go. He had expected her to argue, or to cry, or to withdraw. He had not expected silence. Silence, in his experience, meant one of 2 things. The person had nothing to say, or the person had nothing they needed to prove with words. He was not sure which one it was, and that, for the first time in a very long time, made him uncomfortable. In the observation deck above the arena, Dohan found a seat near the front. The room was packed with spectators, thousands of aliens from hundreds of species, all watching holographic screens that showed the arena from every angle. The noise was enormous, a wall of sound made up of languages he could not understand. He opened a comm channel to Sujin on the Hegemony homeworld. Her face appeared on his small screen, tight with worry. "She is about to go in," Dohan said. His voice was not steady. "I know," Sujin said. "I am watching the broadcast. Sujin, if she gets hurt in there, this whole thing was for nothing. We should have refused. We should have taken the embarrassment." Sujin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was low and certain, like she was stating a fact about the weather. "You do not know my sister," she said. Below the observation deck, the arena waited. Its walls shifted slowly, like a living thing breathing in its sleep. Turrets folded and unfolded. Drones hummed in the darkness. The center console glowed with a faint blue light, sitting at the heart of the maze like a jewel in the mouth of a beast. And at the starting gate, standing perfectly still with her hands at her sides and her breathing slow and even, Yuna waited too. The horn sounded. It was deep and long, a sound that vibrated through the walls and into the bones of every creature in the station. On every screen, in every viewing hall, across dozens of worlds that were watching the broadcast, the timer began. 0, 0, 0. The gate opened. The arena came alive. Walls began to shift. Panels slid and rotated, creating new corridors and closing old ones. Turrets dropped from the ceiling, their targeting lasers sweeping the floor in red lines. Attack drones launched from hidden compartments in the walls, small, fast, armed with stun charges strong enough to drop a creature 3 times Yuna's size. The arena's AI controlled everything, adjusting in real time, learning, adapting. Yuna stepped through the gate. She did not run. That was the first thing the spectators noticed. Every champion before her had run. The instinct was universal across all known species. When the horn sounds and the walls start moving, you run. You push forward as fast as you can and hope your speed and strength carry you through. Yuna walked, but it was not the walk of someone who was frozen or afraid. It was the walk of someone who was listening. Her eyes moved constantly, left, right, up, down, but her body stayed relaxed. Her steps were light and precise. She moved like water, finding its way through cracks in a stone. 3 seconds in, the first turret locked onto her. Its laser painted a red dot on her chest. It fired. Yuna was not there. She had shifted 1 step to the left at the exact moment the turret committed to its firing sequence. The shot hit the wall behind her. But she did not just dodge it. The shot struck a wall panel at a specific angle, and the panel cracked, revealing a maintenance gap behind it, a shortcut that bypassed the first corridor entirely. In the observation deck, a low murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the alien analysts leaned forward in his seat and whispered to his colleague. Did she know that panel was weak? She knew. At the 8-second mark, something changed in Yuna's movement. It was subtle. Most of the spectators did not notice it, but the arena's AI did. Yuna had stopped reacting to threats. She had started moving before them. The turrets would begin to rotate, and she was already out of their firing line. The walls would start to shift, and she was already stepping through the gap that was about to open. The drones would launch, and she was already positioned so that their attack paths crossed each other, causing them to collide. She had figured out the pattern. In 8 seconds, she had watched the arena long enough to understand the rhythm of its algorithm, the order in which it activated threats, the timing of its wall movements, the logic of its drone deployments. And now she was not fighting the arena. She was using it. At 15 seconds she reached the middle ring. No champion in the history of the Crucible had reached the middle ring in under 90 seconds. The arena's AI detected the unusual progress and escalated. New turrets activated, faster drones deployed. The walls began shifting more aggressively, slamming together with enough force to crush bone. Yuna did not slow down. She sped up. But even now, she was not running in the way animals run, panicked, desperate, burning energy. She moved with an economy that was almost mechanical. Every step covered exactly the distance it needed to. Every turn of her body avoided exactly the threat it needed to avoid. She wasted nothing, not a single motion, not a single breath. At 22 seconds, she did something that made the arena's designers, watching from a control room deep inside the station, stop breathing. She redirected a turret. Not with her hands, she did not touch it. She positioned herself so that when the turret fired, its shot hit another turret's power cable. The second turret died. Then she moved through the gap in its coverage like she had planned it from the beginning. Because she had. At 28 seconds, she entered the inner ring. The inner ring was the most dangerous section of the arena. The walls moved faster. The drones were smarter. The turrets had predictive targeting. They did not aim where you were, they aimed where you were going to be. Every champion who had ever reached the inner ring had slowed down here. Many had been hit. Some had been carried out. Yuna entered the inner ring and did not slow down. The predictive turrets fired at where she should have been, but she was never there. She moved in a pattern that the targeting system could not predict, because it was not a pattern at all. It was pure, real-time calculation. She was reading the turrets' movements, understanding their prediction models, and placing herself in the one spot where every model was wrong at the same time. At 35 seconds, the arena's AI did something it had never done before. It paused. For exactly 0.4 seconds, the system hesitated, recalculating. It had run out of pre-programmed responses. The human in the arena was not behaving like any species in its database. It needed new instructions. Yuna used those 0.4 seconds to cross the last 20 meters. At 42 seconds, she placed her hand on the center console. It was a gentle motion. She did not slam her hand down or collapse against it. She simply reached out and touched it, the way someone might touch the shoulder of a friend. The arena stopped. Every turret powered down. Every drone froze in the air and dropped to the floor. The lights came on. Full, bright, white lights that revealed the entire arena at once. And on every screen in the station, in every viewing hall, on every world watching the broadcast, the timer stopped. 0:00:42. The observation deck was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that happens when thousands of beings all stop breathing at the same time. Dowan sat in his seat, with his hands gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles had turned white. His mouth was open. He could not close it. On the screen closest to him, the biometric feed showed Yuna's vital signs. Heart rate, 62 beats per minute. Respiration, normal. Cortisol levels, baseline. She was calmer now than when she had entered the arena. The most dangerous obstacle course in the galaxy had not raised her heart rate by a single beat. In the control room, the arena's chief designer stared at his console. He pulled up the movement data and replayed it. He watched Yuna's path through the arena, a clean, impossible line from the outer gate to the center console, curving around every threat with millimeter precision. It looked like the solution to a math problem. It looked like it had been drawn by a machine. But it had not been drawn by a machine. It had been drawn by a small woman from a planet that the galaxy considered harmless. In the council viewing box, Teijin stood at the window. He had been standing for the entire 42 seconds, though he had not realized it. His hands were pressed flat against the glass. Below him, in the arena, Yuna stood at the center console with her hands still resting on it. She looked up, directly at the viewing box, directly at him, and for a moment their eyes met. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She just looked at him with those dark, steady eyes. And Teijin, who had spent 37 years watching the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy fight and kill and destroy, felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt afraid. His mouth was close to an open microphone. He did not realize this, and in a voice that was barely louder than a breath, he said the words that would be replayed across the galaxy for years to come. That is not possible. But it was. The timestamp was there for everyone to see, frozen on every screen in letters of burning blue light. 42 seconds, and in the arena below, standing in the silence she had created, Yuna finally took her hand off the console. She looked around at the dead drones and the darkened turrets and the walls that had stopped trying to crush her. Then she turned and walked back toward the gate, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The station broke into chaos within minutes. It started in the observation decks, where spectators from dozens of species began shouting over each other in languages that the translation systems could barely keep up with. Some were demanding explanations. Others were demanding the run be declared invalid. A group of champions from a war-built species called an emergency protest, claiming the arena had malfunctioned. Their representatives slammed a massive fist on a console and cracked it in half, screaming that no Class C species could have done what they had just seen. But the data was clean. The arena systems had recorded everything. Every wall movement, every turret shot, every drone deployment, every centimeter of Yuna's path. There was no malfunction. There was no cheat. There was only a woman who had solved the most dangerous puzzle in the galaxy in less time than it took most species to understand the instructions. Teijin was summoned to the Hegemony Council chamber within the hour. The chamber was a massive room at the heart of the station, circular, with seats arranged in rising tiers around a central floor. Representatives from the 12 senior species sat in the upper tiers, the oldest, most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Below them sat the mid-tier species, and at the very bottom, in a small section near the door, sat the junior species. The human section was empty. Sujin had not yet arrived. Teijin stood on the central floor. He had overseen the Crucible trials for 37 years. He had briefed this council hundreds of times. He had never felt nervous before. Today, his hands would not stop moving. He kept pressing them together, pulling them apart, pressing them together again. "Show us the data," said the council chair, a being whose species had been part of the hegemony since its founding. Its voice was old and heavy. Teijin activated the holographic display. Yuna's run played again, this time with full analytical overlays. Movement vectors, threat timelines, reaction speeds, decision points. The room watched in silence as the 42 seconds unfolded in slow motion, each fraction of a second annotated with data that made the silence grow deeper. Then Teijin pulled up the biometric data. He put it on the largest screen in the room so that everyone could see it clearly. "This is her brain activity during the trial," he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, too thin, too careful. He pointed to a section of the scan. "This area is what most species use for threat response. In every champion we have ever tested, this area shows a massive increase in activity during the trial. Fear, aggression, survival instinct. These are normal responses." He paused. In the human, this area showed no increase at all. Zero. She experienced no measurable fear during the entire event. A murmur moved through the chamber like wind through tall grass. But this is what concerns me more, Taejin continued. He pointed to another section of the brain scan. This is her decision-making center. In most species, this area operates at a certain level during combat, high, but within expected limits. In the human, this area was operating at a level we have never recorded in any species. She was not reacting to the arena, she was solving it, in real time, like a living calculation. He let the data hang in the air for a moment. She did not fight the arena, Taejin said quietly. She understood it. In 8 seconds, she learned its pattern. In 42 seconds, she beat it. The theoretical minimum, the fastest time our own designers believed was physically possible, was 51 seconds. She beat the theoretical minimum by 9 seconds. The chamber erupted. Species representatives shouted demands and accusations. Several called for an immediate retest. Others called for the human to be detained and examined. 3 species formally requested that the trial be erased from the record. But then, cutting through the noise like a blade, came a voice from the back of the chamber. It was calm and clear, and spoke in perfectly translated Galactic Standard. If I may. Every head turned. Sujin walked down the central aisle toward the floor. She was dressed simply, dark clothes, no jewelry, no symbols of rank, except a small pin on her collar that marked her as Earth's diplomatic representative. She was not tall, she was not imposing, but she walked with the kind of quiet certainty that made larger beings step aside without knowing why. She reached the central floor and stood beside Taejin. She looked up at the council with an expression that was polite and patient and absolutely unmovable. I have been listening to your concerns, she said. I understand them. You are surprised. You are confused. Some of you are frightened. I will try to help. She clasped her hands in front of her. My sister, the woman you just watched, is not genetically modified. She has received no chemical enhancement. She carries no implants. She is, by every medical standard, in both human and hegemony science, an ordinary human being. The murmuring started again. Sujin waited for it to fade. Humans have a concept that does not translate well into most galactic languages, she continued. The closest word is training. On our world, we take ordinary individuals, people with no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no ability to see in the dark or survive in a vacuum, and we reshape them. Through years of discipline, repetition, and pressure, we teach their minds and bodies to operate beyond what biology intended. We break them down and build them back up until they can do things that should not be possible for our species. She paused and let her eyes move across the council. She looked at each senior representative in turn, the ancient, the powerful, the beings who had ruled the galaxy since before Earth had language. My sister trained for 14 years under one of the finest instructors our species has ever produced, Sujin said. She was taught to think without panic, to see without distraction, to move without waste. Every unnecessary thought, every flicker of hesitation, every gram of fear, it was removed piece by piece over years, until what remained was only the problem and the solution. She took a breath, and then she said the words that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Yuna is not our best. She is simply prepared. There are others like her, many others, and the ones who are better than her, you would not want to meet them in your arena. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of 200 species realizing at the same moment that they had made a terrible miscalculation. They had looked at humanity, small, soft, short-lived, clawless, fangless humanity, and seen nothing worth worrying about. And now they were sitting in a room, being told, calmly and politely, that the thing they had ignored was something they should have been watching very carefully. In the upper tier, the council chair leaned forward slowly. What classification do you believe your species deserves? It asked. Sujin looked up at the ancient being and smiled. It was a small, polite smile. the kind of smile that carried a weight behind it. "That is for you to decide," she said. "We are simply here to show you who we are." While the council debated, and the station trembled with political aftershocks, Yuna sat in the Baekdu's small kitchen. Dohan had made ramyeon, instant noodles, the same kind they sold in every convenience store back home. It was not fancy, it was not impressive, but it was hot and salty, and it tasted like earth. Yuna ate slowly, holding the bowl with both hands. Dohan sat across from her, still unable to fully process what he had seen. He watched her eat for a while, searching for some sign, some crack in her calm, some hint of the extraordinary thing she had just done. She looked exactly the same as she had when she had boarded the ship. "Yuna," he said finally. She looked up. What did it feel like, in there? She thought about it. She took another bite of noodles. She chewed slowly and swallowed. "Quiet," she said. And that was all. The vote came 3 days later. It was not close. The Hegemony Council reclassified humanity as a Class A species, the highest threat designation in the galactic system. It was the category reserved for apex predators, for species with natural weapons and ancient warrior traditions and bodies built for war. Humanity had none of these things. They were placed in Class A anyway. The council members who voted for it did not do so out of respect. They did it because they were afraid of what would happen if they did not. Within a week, the consequences began to ripple outward. Earth's application for upgraded trade privileges was approved immediately, not after years of negotiation as expected, but overnight, with no debate. Territorial protections that humanity had been begging for since joining the galactic community were granted without a single objection. 3 species that had been quietly encroaching on human-claimed space pulled their ships back within hours of the reclassification. And then, the ambassadors started arriving. Ships from species that had never shown interest in Earth began requesting diplomatic access. Some came with gifts and offers of alliance. Others came with scientists and scanning equipment, asking politely, and sometimes not so politely, for permission to study human biology, human training methods, human psychology. They wanted to understand how a species with no claws, no armor, no venom, and a lifespan of less than a century could produce a being who had done what Yuna had done. The answer, when they found it, did not comfort them. Humans were not special because of their bodies. They were special because of their minds, and because they had learned, over thousands of years of war and hardship and survival, how to reshape those minds into something that biology had never intended. They called it training. They called it discipline. They called it willpower. But whatever they called it, the result was the same. Ordinary creatures who could, through sheer stubbornness and effort, become extraordinary. And the galaxy did not know what to do with that. On the Baekdu, heading home through the quiet lanes of deep space, Dohan sat in the cockpit and watched the stars. The ship hummed around him, the same old groans and creaks it always made, the sounds of a vessel that was tired but still flying. Behind him, in the crew quarters, Yuna was asleep. She had been sleeping a lot since they left the station. Not from exhaustion, he thought, more like she had finished a long task, and her body had decided it was time to rest. He had been carrying a question with him for days. It sat in his chest like a stone, growing heavier with each passing hour. He had tried to ignore it, but it would not leave. The next morning, when Yuna came to the cockpit with a cup of tea in her hands, he finally asked it. "Yuna," he said, "were you always like this?" She sat in the co-pilot's seat and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. She did not answer immediately. The stars moved slowly outside the window, and the only sound was the hum of the ship's engines. "No," she said finally. Dohan waited. He had learned by now that Yuna spoke when she was ready, and not before. Pushing her only made her quieter. When I was a child, she said, I was afraid of everything. She said it simply, without shame or drama, like she was describing the weather from a long time ago. I grew up in Busan. I was small. I was scared of dogs. I was scared of thunder. Other children would run and climb and fight, and I would sit in the corner and try to make myself as small as possible. She took a sip of tea. I hated being afraid, not because it was painful, though it was. I hated it because it was loud. Fear is the loudest thing in the world. It screams inside your head and drowns out everything else. You cannot think. You cannot see clearly. You cannot act. You can only react, and reacting is always too slow. Do-han listened without moving. When I was 14, Yuna continued, I decided I was finished. Not brave. I did not suddenly become brave. I was just done. Done with the noise. Done with the screaming inside my head. I wanted silence. She looked at the stars. That is when I found Jisuk. He was running a training camp outside of the city. Retired special forces. Very old school, very hard. Most people quit within the first month. I almost quit within the first week. A small, rare smile crossed her face. It was gone almost immediately. But Jisuk did not teach me to fight. Other instructors taught fighting, punching, kicking, weapons, tactics. Jisuk taught something different. He called it cleaning the room. He said the human mind is like a room full of furniture, and most of the furniture is junk, fear, doubt, anger, pride, hesitation. All of it takes up space. All of it makes noise, and until you remove it, you will never be able to see the room clearly. She turned her cup slowly in her hands. So that is what we did. For 14 years. We removed the furniture, piece by piece. He would put me in situations designed to create fear, and he would teach me to watch the fear without obeying it, to see it as information, not as a command. Over time, the fear became quieter, and then it became silent. And when it was silent, I could finally hear everything else. Do-han said nothing for a long time. He thought about the arena, the walls moving, the turrets firing, the drones attacking, and he thought about Yuna walking through it all, like she was walking through a garden. When you were in the arena, he said slowly, and everything was happening around you, what did you hear? Yuna considered this. Everything, she said. Every machine, every movement, every pattern. When the noise inside is gone, the world outside becomes very clear. You can see how things connect. You can see what will happen before it happens. It is not magic. It is not a gift. It is just silence. She finished her tea and set the cup down. Fear is your brain guessing, she said. It looks at something and tries to predict the worst outcome, and then it screams at you to run. But guessing is not thinking. That is all. Back on Earth, in a small apartment in Seoul, Jisuk sat at his kitchen table and watched the replay of Yuna's run on a battered old datapad. The footage had been broadcast across the galaxy, but Jisuk watched it on a screen no bigger than his hand, leaning close with his reading glasses on. He watched it 3 times. The first time, he watched her movement. The second time, he watched her timing. The third time, he watched her eyes. And when it was over, he set the datapad down and sat very still for a long time. Then he picked up his communicator and called Sujin. I saw it, he said. His voice was rough and quiet. The whole galaxy saw it, Sujin replied. Jisuk nodded slowly. She is going to change everything. The way they see us, the way they treat us. Everything is going to be different now. Is that not a good thing? Jisuk paused. It is, but it also makes her a target. Every species out there is going to want to understand her, study her, test her, or stop her. She is not just a person anymore. She is proof, and proof is dangerous. He rubbed his tired eyes. Make sure the galaxy does not break her for it. He ended the call, and sat in the quiet of his apartment. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful evening, a peaceful one. He wondered if Yuna could see the stars from wherever she was right now, and he hoped she was sleeping well. 2 weeks after the Crucible, a classified intelligence report was circulated among the 12 senior species of the hegemony. It was marked with the highest security designation, restricted to senior officials and species leaders only. The report was 60 pages long and contained detailed analysis of human biology, psychology, history, and military capability. It included footage from the arena, brain scans, historical data from Earth's wars, and interviews with galactic scientists who had studied human behavior. The report was titled Reclassification Memo, Species 4417, Humans. Most of the report was dry, technical, and careful. But the final page contained a single recommendation, written in plain language that needed no translation. It was the kind of recommendation that was usually reserved for species with planet-killing weapons, or armies that numbered in the billions. It had never before been applied to a species that was physically weaker than most of its galactic neighbors. The recommendation read, "Do not engage, do not provoke, do not underestimate. They do not fight the way we understand fighting. They remove everything that is unnecessary, fear, hesitation, doubt, until only the solution remains. And they reach that solution faster than any species we have encountered. They do it quietly. And that is what makes them dangerous." And somewhere in the deep black between the stars, aboard a groaning, creaking old ship called the Baekdu, Yuna slept. She was curled on her side in the narrow crew bunk, a worn paperback book open on her chest, her breathing slow and even. Her face was soft in sleep, no tension, no sharpness, no trace of the thing that had terrified a galaxy. She looked like a student who had fallen asleep reading. She looked like someone's younger sister. She looked like the least dangerous person in the universe. And that, perhaps, was the most frightening thing of all.